to work at a company that has 100% carbon-free portfolio. Our experience, we have experience operating and maintaining a large, diverse mix of carbon-free. And again, we also work to help our member utilities run their equipment efficiently. Next slide, please, Carl. Our guiding principles, I just really noted on them: the carbon-free emissions, efficient use of natural resources. Because we're a joint action agency and a public utility, we are nonprofit. So we generate electricity at cost. So the electricity is passed on to our members at cost. There's no profit making involved with that. And from reliability, we have sufficient capacity to meet peak loads. So we have a generation diversity, and I'll talk about that in a moment. Next slide, please, go. So if you take a look at it, I'll just briefly touch on our non-nuclear generation. We have a 9 Canyon wind project. That's almost a 100 megawatt electric wind project located in the hills outside of Kennewick, Washington. We also have Packwood Lake Hydroelectric Project, about a 26 megawatt electric hydro plant. When the company was formed in 1957, that was the first project that we built and were invested in, was Packwood. Packwood Hydro. White Bluff Solar Station, that was really just a small experimental solar station that will be retiring soon. We also have Tieton Hydroelectric Project, Portland Hydroelectric Project, and Stone Creek Hydroelectric Project. I'm very proud of the fact that we've continued to build our portfolio relative to hydro. We are a firm believer that it takes a mix, if you will, of generating sources to be successful. And to that end, we just recently opened our Horn Rapids Solar Storage and Training Facility here for the city of Richland. It is a 4 megawatt solar plant that also has 1 megawatt electric worth of battery storage. So we are trying to stay involved in storage. We know that storage is going to be an important part of the future as we look to decarbonize generation. So in this particular area here, it keeps our fingers, if you will, in the game and learning. And we've opened that, also working with our local unions. They use it as a training facility. And we're also partnered with the city of Richland. Next slide, please. And also beyond the generation piece, we are involved in electric vehicle infrastructure. If you look at the DeVita Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Transportation Alliance, we have 10 charging stations that we've installed along the I-90 and I-82 corridors. Our goal is to bridge the gap between eastern and western Washington for electrical vehicles, so people can leave Seattle and know that they've got the ability to recharge their electric vehicles as they head east through the state. So, and we just recently were very proud of the fact we're awarded a new $1.15 million grant from the Clean Energy Fund, and we're going to be using that to continue to install more electric vehicle charging stations. Next slide, please. But at the heart of our company, our greatest asset is our Columbia Generating Station. It is a General Electric boiling water reactor. It's been online since 1984. We're currently licensed through 2043. Our output is 1,207 megawatts electric, and we supply 4% of the electricity used in the Northwest and 10% of the electricity in Washington. And of course, as you well know, the key with Columbia Generating Station is that it's 24-hour a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, baseload power that is there. And we'll talk more about the importance of that, although I'm sure most of you on this call will understand why that's significant. Next slide, please. I'm very proud of the record of Energy Northwest over the last 10 years. There's been a lot of work that we've put into Columbia Generating Station. We've really done a couple different things. First of all, we started working hard to fix the equipment and make sure that the plant was in a better position to run and be reliable for the users here in the Northwest. And then in addition to that, once we had that established, we also took a look to do some smaller upgrades. There were some upgrades that were available that other plants in the country had taken advantage of. We had not yet at Columbia Generating Station. So we basically put a couple of modifications in place. I use the term minor, although there's no minor modification in a nuclear plant, but relatively minor for the output we got. And through that work that was done, through a combination of increasing the output by almost 60 megawatts electric, the Columbia Generating Station, and to take our operating capability factor up over 92%. That means over 92% of the time, Columbia is there providing electricity to the grid. The only time we're not is when we are refueling the plant to put new fuel in it. We're currently in a refueling outage right now. As for an example, in the last 2 years since we refueled last time, our reactor has been critical for 2 straight years. We did take our turbine off for a short amount of time last spring when the hydro was very high and the price of electricity was going negative, and we were asked to back it down during the springtime. And we took advantage of that to do some balancing of our turbine, but we never shut our reactor down. So essentially, out of the last 6 years, we've had virtually 4 straight years, 2 different 2-year cycles in there where the plant ran nonstop for 2 straight years. So once again, it gets back to that dependability and the importance of nuclear in anchoring our transmission systems as we start to phase carbon out of our generating process. But you can see here, as a result of the work that was done by the Energy Northwest team to increase the output and to improve the performance of the plant and improve the equipment performance, very proud of the team. They've set numerous generation records through the last decade. Next slide, please. And no surprise here, as a result of the improved performance of the plant over the last decade and the increased performance in megawatts electric, you can see over the last 10 years, our cost of power has continually trended down, and we predict that to go through the next 2 years also, and we're on track to meet that. So once again, we've increased that production, and at the same time, we have lowered staff. We've lowered staff for the company by almost 200 people over the last 10 years. You combine that with the increased generation and the improved performance of Columbia Generating Station, and you can see the effects it's had on economics. So we're very, very proud of what the team has done there to make us very, very competitive, if you will, in the generation mix. Next slide, please. This is just a study that was done. The Nuclear Energy Institute is located in Washington, D.C., and they're advocates certainly for the nuclear energy industry. But they did some study to take a look for each plant in the country, its effect on the economics of the local area. And you can see here that $690 million in annual economic output to the region, $475 million specifically in Washington State, supports 2,800 jobs. Now, as a company, we've got about 1,000 employees, but the 2,800 takes into account all the contractors that support us at Columbia Generating Station, the people who come in for the refueling outage. As I noted, right now, we're in the middle of a refueling outage. We have almost 2,500 people on site to conduct that refueling outage, because over 35 days, we put new fuel in the reactor. And in addition, we go through and do preventative maintenance and fix any equipment issues we may have. So it becomes a big economic boon for the local area. Obviously, these people, many of them are from out of the area or out of state even, and they're using the hotels and the restaurants and all those other areas. So certainly a big infusion of cash in the area. Next slide, please. Carbon reduction is driving change. You're all aware of that. In 2019, the Clean Energy Transformation Act was passed in Olympia. Our team did a lot of work, frankly, meeting with the representatives in Olympia to talk about what we could do to address carbon. As I noted earlier, we're a carbon-free company. As I noted, I'm very personally passionate about carbon-free, fixing the climate and the environment. Spent a lot of time in Olympia talking to legislators who had previously in sessions tried to pass different bills that would have required 100% renewables for supplying electricity. Fortunately, it never passed. And the reason I say fortunately is because, as I'm sure you on the call here understand, is that sounds good. It can make us feel good. But the fact of the matter, the science doesn't support 100% renewables right now. You need something there to base load and hold that transmission system down when the wind's not blowing, the sun's not shining. So to that end, we spent a lot of time talking about the need for nuclear to be part of the solution for moving carbon out of the generating sector. And we were successful. It was interesting. Nobody was willing to actually come out and put nuclear in the bill or step in front of the camera and say we need nuclear necessarily. But the legislation was passed, and it said all you had to do was be carbon free to meet the needs of the bill. And that was their nod to the fact that nuclear could be part of the solution. Behind closed doors, both sides of the aisle would talk and say, listen, we get it, Brad, we understand. It needs to be there. When the bill was written, it just said carbon free, and that allowed nuclear to enter into the discussion for addressing climate. If you look at the legislation, carbon emitters, all coal is supposed to be gone by 2025. And the point to remember here is not just gone, but you cannot bring electrons generated by coal from other states back into Washington state either as a part of this. So it's not just that you can't generate it within the state, you can't generate it in Wyoming and ship it into Washington. 2030, providers must be greenhouse gas neutral, and by 2045, 100% clean electricity. So how do we replace those greenhouse gas emitting resources with carbon-free resources without jeopardizing reliability and affordability? Next slide, please. So transition. We're working on focus on our carbon reduction, increasing capacity challenges. I talked about all the charging stations that we're building. So not only are we taking out sources of carbon generation, so we're removing sources of generation, we are continuing to increase the demand by adding things like electrical vehicles and other areas, as I noted earlier with our charging stations. Okay, next slide, please. Just kind of as a starting point, if you see where do we stand today in 2020 for net generation, well, 64% is hydroelectric. We have an incredible, and I'm stating the obvious here, we have an incredible advantage compared to the rest of the nation because of our hydroelectric that's available to us. As a matter of fact, as I tell people, if we can't figure out in Washington state how to get carbon free with the hydroelectric power that we have available to us, I frankly don't hold out hope for anyone else in the country in making this work. But the fact of the matter is that I do believe we are going to set the standard and the example for the rest of the nation as to how you make this happen. So you can see 64% is hydro, and you can look through some of the other breakdowns there. Natural gas, 13% currently, coal about 7%. Nuclear energy, 9%, as I said earlier, 9 to 10%. And then pump storage, actually a little bit there at 7%. So that's what we look at right now. So currently, 80% of our electricity in Washington state almost is carbon free. So once again, we have an advantage the rest of the country doesn't have because of the hydro. So if we can't figure out how to address this other 20%, as a nation, we're in trouble going after this. But the good news is there's a solution. There's a very simple way to address the rest of that gap. Next slide, please. So if you take a look at the surplus deficit in recent studies, you can see a number of studies that have been done to take a look at what was going to happen relative to the power needs that we have versus what's available. A great question I just saw come across. Columbia Generating Station is located in Richland. We're in the Tri-City area. Thank you for that question. Our company is in the Tri-City. So our plant is located on the Hanford site, which unfortunately causes us some confusion that people confuse us with what's going on in Hanford. But we are distinctly different. It's our own property. It's been rented from them. We are not aligned in business perspective with Hanford, but that's where our plant is located. Thank you for that question. So anyhow, capacity surplus deficit in recent studies, and you can see a number of people did studies to say, as we remove carbon, what is that going to mean to our deficits in megawatt electric? And I know the graph may look small to you, but what I'll tell you is the studies ranged anywhere from 2,000 megawatt shortage to 5,000 megawatt shortage by the different groups, including BPA, who did these studies. So we did our own study in 2019 after the legislation was passed, and we got a group called E3, and we asked them to do this study for us, and we are the dotted line, the result of our study, which shows almost 7,000 megawatt electric deficit. And the question may be, why is that so much more significant than the others? If you remember earlier, I talked about the for the use of coal, and you can't bring the electrons into the state. Before the legislation was completed, the other studies that were done made assumptions that you could still pump electricity into the state from some of these carbon sources. Our study came after the legislation was passed and realized you could no longer take credit for that. So therefore, that shows why it's an even greater deficit. Next slide, please. So as I noted, we went out, we got this study completed. Next slide, please. And when E3 took a look and they looked at the legislation, they said, with the technology that is available today, and frankly, some that's even in its infant situation, here are the acceptable technology that can help meet these demands and these deficits. And you can see the obvious players: hydro, wind, solar, storage. But again, when we talk about storage, I told you we had the solar project with 1 megawatt electric battery storage. So just to put it in perspective, that battery is about the size of a semi-trailer, okay? It's about the size of a semi-trailer. And that battery is good for 1 megawatt electric, and it will last 4 hours. So what does that mean? That battery has the capability, and this is state-of-the-art right now, storage. We just installed, just opened this, working with PNNL, the Pacific Northwest Lab. That battery has the capability to feed 150 homes for 4 hours. All right, so when we think about storage, we're believers in it. We think it'll continue to get better, but when you look at what are our options today, storage provides a little bit of a stopgap. When you think of like a city of Seattle, if you were to go 100% renewables and say, we'll just rely on storage for when the sun's not shining, the wind's not blowing, and use battery power. Remember what I just said, a battery the size of a semi-trailer supports 150 homes for 4 hours. Also, then they recognize Columbia Generating Station currently meets the requirements of the legislation. Then it took a look at small modular reactors, biomethane, and carbon capture and sequestration. Those were the technologies that they said would meet the requirements of the legislation when they did their study. Next up, please. Okay, so what were the results of that? First of all, they said if you're going to build a system that basically relies on wind, water, solar, and battery storage, it would require over 100 gigawatts of new capacity, over 100, so 1,000 megawatts to gigawatts, so 100,000 megawatts of new capacity. Remember, Columbia is a 1,000 megawatt plant and supplies about 1 million people. So that would have to be added by 2045. So when you take a look at that, it says 10.5 gigawatts of storage and 52 gigawatts of wind, 42 gigawatts of solar. Now I'm going to tell you, I don't think you could even physically build that, but they said the whole idea here is if you built out that much in a large enough area in the Northwest, and this is really considering moving out into Montana to build wind and stuff, that somewhere in the Northwest part of the country, the wind's got to be blowing at some time in any given day. Now, when you start taking into account the transmission that would have to be built for that and everything else, I don't even think it's frankly scientifically feasible. But the fact is they did take a look at what something like that would take to cover it. Next slide, please. And then they started taking a look at, if you took a look at trying to do a mix, how could you do a mix? Well, for starters, they added Columbia Generating Station back into the mix. And that alone made a significant difference. Having that 1,200 megawatts electric guaranteed every single day around the clock made a significant difference in what you would need from renewables, and make the cost more feasible because you don't have to do the overbuild. Basically, the thought would be they would save almost $1.4 billion versus the option of using all renewables. Next slide, please. And then finally, they said, well, how about if we were to bring in 5.3 gigawatts of small modular reactors or new nuclear? What effect would that have? And you add that with Columbia Generating Station, you now reduce the amount of renewables needed to 9 gigawatt storage, 44 wind, 37 solar, significant difference, 91 gigawatts less than you would have needed in the first scenario if you would have used all renewables, 91 gigawatts left because you've got that firm based nuclear power there 24/7 providing it. Now, what does that mean translating to dollars? Probably about an $8 billion annually compared to only the renewable storage. So clearly the study we did pointed to, next slide, please, that the best answer for the Northwest to meet the legislation and get carbon free is a resource mix. A resource mix, as we've said all along, I told you before, we're a carbon-free company. We own hydro, we own wind, we own solar, we own storage. We believe in all of those. We continue to grow our portfolio in those areas. But we know that you need something to anchor that transmission system for the days the wind doesn't blow, the sun doesn't shine. And that's where the nuclear piece comes in. And if we think we could just start phasing out carbon generate electricity and not bring baseload back into it. But all I offer up as an example, if we don't do this right, is California. Look south to California and the rolling brownouts that take place down there that are a result of the fact they just don't have a transmission. All right, before I was thinking it was just a problem with their fire piece, but as I started digging into it, what we found was very clearly, fires played part of the problem, but the fact of the matter is, even without the fires, they've retired so much of the carbon generators that it was causing rolling brownouts. And in a lot of cases, what they were doing is they were going back on what they had legislated because they couldn't meet the goals they set for themselves. And they started firing up the carbon generators again, just because they were in no position to meet the demand. So our goal here in the Washington State, from Energy Northwest perspective, is what can we do to support and make it so we are successful here in Washington State, and we can set an example for the rest of the country, frankly, and the world, as to how do you go about getting that proper mix to ensure we can start moving carbon out of the mix. So that end, I talked about new nuclear playing a role in this. Next slide, please. So that end, a couple of years ago, we were already taking a look at from base load and supporting our customers as a joint action agency. How do we ensure they have the electricity that they're counting on when they need it? And we started then looking at new nuclear. Well, about a year ago, the Department of Energy started federal funding for new nuclear demonstration projects. So it's called the ARDP, Advanced Reactor Demonstration Program, ARDP Demonstration Project. And the Department of Energy set up two different fundings where they didn't match up to $6 billion per project with federal funds to help build advanced nuclear. And they had that out there, and they were looking for people to apply for those particular loans, those opportunities. We were approached here at Energy Northwest by several companies who have models for new nuclear, advanced nuclear reactors. Several companies approached us and they wanted to do business with us because as part of the process, you had to go in with a design and an owner of a new technology and design, and you had to have a utility partner. Well, everyone around the country, frankly, took a look at several factors. The fact that with the legislation we have in Washington State that we've discussed, the SEED legislation, that there was going to be a need for more baseload electricity. The fact that our legislature out here, through the passing of legislation, demonstrated that they realized that nuclear needed to be part of the solution. That's why the bill allowed new nuclear. Frankly, Governor Inslee, as we know, in his short run for the presidential race, and in part of his answer for climate control was nuclear needed to be part of the solution. And then, of course, we go back to the fact that the question was asked earlier, where we're located. We sit on Department of Energy property. The Department of Energy wants to make this happen. We are located on Department of Energy property. We have two sites at Energy Northwest that had been started with nuclear plants back in the 70s under the old Washington Public Power System that were never completed. So I have two sites sitting out there right now with all the transmission infrastructure, all the water infrastructure, and had been previously licensed by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to build a nuclear plant on those sites. So basically, we were an incredibly attractive partner. So we had a number of suitors who came to us. In the end, one company, X Energy, located in Maryland, which has a gas-cooled reactor, pebble bed reactor, approached us. We really liked their design. We liked the safety behind their design, the functionality of it. There had been some this technology proven in other places in the world previously. So we partnered with them. And then in the end, we were approached by TerraPower also, who located obviously in Seattle, Bill Gates' company. And they also wanted to partner with us. Their situation is a little different than we are in the one with X Energy. But the fact is, we submitted with both of those. The truth of the matter is everybody assumed one company on the East was going to win one of these, and I felt there was only one spot left. Well, when it was said and done, we'll go to the next slide, please. And we can go to the next one. Actually, this is all stuff I talked about already. When it's said and done, actually, the two companies we partner with were given the two awards, X Energy and TerraPower. So first of all, I'll talk a little bit about TerraPower. They're also partnered with GE Hitachi. It's a natrium reactor, which what that means is the cooling medium and the energy transport medium is salt. It's called molten salt. So natrium being on the scientific chart table is natrium for salt. So this is a salt reactor. As it says, single reactor facility utilizing sodium cooled fast reactor technology, about 336 megawatts electric. And they have some salt storage capability where you can heat it up and store it in another liquid tank, if you will, that could get it up to 500 megawatts generation. Preliminary targeted power cost with the funding support is $50 to $55 megawatt, with the estimated potential to reduce up to get it down to 40 megawatt per hour with the salt storage option, getting it up to 500 megawatts. So we're with TerraPower. Now in TerraPower's situation, they are team with Pacific Core to actually own and have the offtake from this. So Pacific Core is a Warren Buffett associated utility, and they would be the owner. They would take all the power. Our role at Energy Northwest would be to help support licensing, design, and if they decided to build it on our site here at Energy Northwest on the Hanford, to be the operator and maintainer of it. Now they're currently considering about 3 different sites right now as to where they could potentially put that, with us being one of them, the National Lab in Idaho being another, and a third site that they haven't released, but we're guessing it's east of here and states east of here. So our role with them is a little different. I would say we play a part in their role. The other award went to X Energy. Next slide, please. So X Energy, 4-reactor facility utilizing high temperature gas, helium as a reactor cooling technology. It says utilizing triso fuel, that's the pebble bed style where the fuels contain in graphite balls that are about the size of a cue ball. And total net generation, 320 megawatts, 80 per reactor plant. Preliminary targeted power cost, $40 to $45 per megawatt hour. We are currently probably more engaged with X Energy as TerraPower decides where they want to site their plant and what that looks like. So with X Energy, we've been working with them already on the design process and getting licensed for their design. And at the same time, we have found one of our members, Grant County. We've signed a memorandum of understanding with Grant County and X Energy. Grant County is very interested actually in owning the whole unit, all 320 megawatts. Give a lot of credit. Kevin North, their general manager, CEO, basically at Grant County, is actually a nuclear engineer by education, had worked at Trojan and Columbia in the 90s before doing a few other jobs and then coming to the public power side at Grant County. He looks to the future and he believes there's going to be a definite need as these carbon sources are start to move out of the mix, that there's going to be a tremendous demand as he sees it, and he accepts that and he wants to get out front of this. And right now they're interested in potentially owning the whole unit. We had built it here on a site at Energy Northwest on the Hanford Reservation, and us at Energy Northwest would run it, maintain it. Grant County would own it and take the offtake. So those are the 2 options available to us. Again, up to $6 billion spent to make that happen. 50% of that's going to be financed by the Department of Energy. So this is an opportunity to bring literally billions of dollars into Washington state of federal money as we build this unit out there on the site now. Based on what we project the cost to be, frankly, we see it about $3 billion total. So, from the DOE perspective, about 1.5, and the other 1.5 would be through X Energy, their investment through the design and licensing in Grant County and building right now. So, next slide, please. It says here, role of Energy Northwest. I talked about it. The next 2-3 years. There's a lot. We're just getting started down this path. There's design. There's licensing. We talk about how we'll assist with X Energy and TerraPower. I actually spoke about both of those bullets. We can move on. Thank you. Next slide. We've just recently formally signed the Tri-Energy Partnership, as a matter of fact, with X-Energy. You may have read or seen something about it. I know it was actually covered over in the Seattle Times, in the Oregonian, and it's got a lot of play over here. We call it the Tri-Energy Partnership, it's based on three utilities, or three entities: Energy Northwest, Grant, PUD, and X-Energy. We talked about the XE100 utilizes tri-structural isotropic or triso particle fuel, and the project's going to be sited north of the Tri-Cities. So that's how we came up with the term there for the Tri-Energy Partnership. It seemed to make sense. Next slide, please. As this is our partnership details, we're pursuing the shared goal of siting and constructing that advanced reactor north of the Tri-Cities. We're going to work together efficiently to evaluate project options and milestones. And as I noted earlier, X-Energy is technology, fuel design, Energy Northwest project manager and operator, Grant PUD ownership and offtake. Next slide, please. And to wrap this up, what's next? We will continue to work with technology partners on NRC design approval and certification for these new technologies. And by the way, both of these technologies are what's called walk-away safe. All right, meaning you cannot melt these plants down. The way they're designed, the fuel they're running at atmospheric pressure. The fuel is designed such that it can't happen. So that's one of the reasons they become so much cheaper to build, is the fact that you are not going to need all the safety requirements that you see with the existing plants with the larger footprints. The emergency plan will be much, much more scaled down and minimal. The security plan will be much, much more scaled down and minimal. There's a whole lot of things about it that the safety aspects is what really adds to the savings when it comes to construction cost and operation. So we'll work with the technology partners for approval and certification. We're working on our site to start getting it re-licensed again by the NRC. Doing our due diligence and refined cost estimates. I'm going to tell you in the end, I've told both my partners, prior to COVID anyhow, I used to spend a lot of time on the west side, not just with the legislators, but talking to different groups over there. And a lot of the PUDs I talked to, and I'd give them my discussion about my passion on environment, climate control, and everything we need to do. And it would be interesting. A lot of the public utility members would be, that's fantastic, Brad, we're with you. We got to address this. Oh, by the way, power can't cost me 1 penny more than it does today. Well, I got to tell you that's not going to be the case. You can't phase out some of the cheapest methods of generating electricity, such as coal and natural gas, and still think your rates are going to go down or stay the same. That's just not realistic thinking, as I tell everybody. But if we think wrecking the environment is going to be cost-free, we're kidding ourselves. So we can either pay now to fix the environment and the climate, or we can pay later after we've wrecked it to try to get it back online. So, but the bottom line is, in the end, we are working hard to make these as cost-effective as we possibly can, certainly. And we talk about the cost estimates, increased public understanding and support. That's one of the reasons I'm on the call tonight. It's just been, unfortunately, a year lost. Over the last year, it just frankly has been very disappointing to me that it's cost me the ability to get out around the state and talk to people face to face. And meeting like this, I have no idea how many people are on. I can't see you. I wish we were in a room together so I could, see you face to face and have these conversations. And I'm hoping that time comes again soon, but that's going to be a big part of this, and community stakeholder and outreach. And with that, I went a little past my 30 minutes. I apologize, but let's open it up for questions.
Thank you. And I'm going to add Jim to your spotlight. So Jim's going to get us started.
Yes. Well, I noticed some questions were already came up that weren't answered. One is about deregulation, and it seems to change the priorities of the utilities away from ratepayers and towards stock owners. That's kind of true. I mean, when I love regulation. I'm a regulatory hound. Okay, I hate deregulation because all that means is that there's nothing protecting the consumer. And so, if you look at what's happened in the Northeast, New York and in areas in California and in Texas, what happens is that if something goes wrong, then the utilities can gouge you. And, you know,
Mhm.
suddenly you are paying 10 cents a kilowatt hour, and all of a sudden you're paying $1 a kilowatt hour. I mean, that's insane. That can't happen here in our regulated market. So as far as I'm concerned, it should all be regulated. You know, it's one of those things like the military, like a few other things that should not be in the hands of certain individuals who just, you know, want to make money. I understand corporations want to make money. That's their job. Okay. But it's the job of regulations to make that reasonable. People still get rich. They just don't have to get that rich. So
Jim,
yeah.
Jim, you're spot on. As a matter of fact, and one of the fallouts of this is, as we sit here on one hand as a nation and talk about the need to address carbon and climate and the environment, as you well know, Jim, we got top performing plants in the Midwest that are left with deregulation and being merchants who are potentially going to be shutting down a number of them, removing thousands of megawatts of carbon-free generation, and it just makes no sense. It makes no sense, and then we're going to sit around trying to figure out how do we replace that by building new. As you're well aware, it's crazy.
Yes, in fact, in those places, there's been about 10, you know, foolish closures. They pretty much wiped out the gains they had in their renewable side. So it's sort of like, well, that's not helping. You know, if it's safe and it's, you know, not outrageously expensive, it should continue on. I mean, if a penny a kilowatt hour is too much to pay to save the planet, then your priorities are way wrong. Okay, so
you and I are lying.
Yeah, there was another. Yeah, there's another question that said that 4 cents a kilowatt hour from nuclear, was it alone or was it an average of all sources? It was by itself, so that was nuclear.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yep, that's correct.
And then another question was, what would the physical footprint of a 5.3 gigawatt source from SMRs look like? It probably, well, it depends on the SMR. It depends on if they were all the same SMR. Or if it was a variety of them, but it'd be about 2 square miles. That's it. I mean, it's very, very small. And to do that from wind or solar would be hundreds of square miles. So again, you know, the size is really key. And as Brad said, that, you know, they can't melt down. So this is ideal. This is what we want. We've been looking for this for 30 years, and we have it now. So.
All right.
Let's see what else. The operational date, who knows? It kind of depends.
Well, that's a great. You know, by the DOE, they shot for 2027. Now they knew that was an aggressive goal. We knew it was an aggressive goal. You know, DOE's. I think their thought process was, if we ask for 2030. We may not get it to 2033. If I ask for 2027, we're pushing hard for 2027. And if it slips a year or two, we're still there by the end of the decade. So they wanted to set a very aggressive goal because, they just want us to drive. They want to see a lot of energy around this, and that's what we're going to do. We right now are committed to try to meet the 2027. Absolutely, it's going to be aggressive though.
I'm going to butt in really quick
yeah.
and show you. Here is Columbia Generating Station, and this is sort of my hand-drawn site boundary. So when you said 2 square miles, that's about the size we have available here at this site area. There's a lot of space here, and the Hanford Reach is an enormous area. And then I've got the N reactor there in yellow. So thank you.
Good.
Thanks for that.
Now, Layla said, what could we do as citizens to help support this going forward? And as far as I'm concerned, just support non-carbon sources, all non-carbon sources. You can't, you know, we need so many, as Brad said, we need so much that you can't pick and choose and say, oh, I like solar and I don't want anything else, or I like wind, or I don't like this or that. You need them all. This is too big of an issue. So there is no one source that can supply it all. So you need everything. So all non-carbon emitting sources. And if you support the legislation and support that going forward, that's the best thing you can do.
And Jim, I don't, obviously I can't speak for every individual or every group that's out there, but I will tell you as we take a look for if opposition to making this happen, the one thing I have noted is we have seen more groups, the environmental groups, come over to our side. Now, I'll be the first to tell you, they may be reluctant partners, but to your point, they understand that if we are actually going to tackle this, we've got to use every option available to us. And the greatest crisis right now is the climate and the environment. So we see that as a very, very positive, if you will, for our endeavors.
Good. And then getting into that, things like water stress and, water availability is going to become worse and worse as time goes on. And Dan mentioned as water stress has become bigger, what's the planned water use? And if you look at some of the SMRs, they do use dry cooling. And so they actually are much smaller users of water than any other source. Even wind and solar require water. I mean, everything requires a little bit of water, but the NuScale module can be cooled by air if needed. Of course, anything that's cooled by air sacrifices a little bit of power to do that, and that's okay. Again, that's okay. So we can deal with that too.
Yeah, that's an option we're looking at. Yep, you're absolutely right, Jim.
I do want to mention that just recently, China passed the entire world combined in carbon emissions. Did anyone know that? The rest of the world combined is less than China's carbon emissions right now.
And of course, the flip side, as you know, Jim, they're also passing the whole world though on building new nuclear because they recognize that they understand nuclear is the answer, and they're building nuclear plants hand over fist over there, as you well know.
Yes,
and frankly, this is the big reason why the DOE, as you know, has put this project out there. They see this. I'll be honest, they're more in the area of, frankly, national security, quite honestly, than they are probably in the environment climate side. They're just looking at these other countries that are out there, and they're able to go assist third world countries and get a foot in the door because they have the technology and they're willing to use it. We're standing by here in the United States. Yep.
Yeah. Yep.
Carl, if you're
That's
talking,
us.
you're muted.
Whoops, thank you. Everyone makes that mistake every once in a while. So I'm going to join you folks, because to tell you, we have about 30 people in the call, maybe 29. I think someone just left, and 7 more watching on social media. And of those social media watchers, one person asked, what about reprocessing fuel to reduce the amount of throwaway and boost efficiency? And I think both of you might have some good input there.
I'll let Jim go for this. Is Jim's area of expertise. Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, I talked about the waste. I'm sorry, I didn't quite get that.
Yeah, the waste. It was about reprocessing. Yeah.
Right. Now the waste issue is totally unknown to the public. There's not much of it. It is a teeny amount of waste. All the nuclear waste in the world ever produced by everyone over the last 60 years, the same amount of toxic waste is produced by the coal industry every 30 minutes. Okay, so I mean, the volume is just tiny. And we know what to do with it. Now, I say that as a scientist, we know what to do with it. We've already disposed of a lot of nuclear waste in New Mexico and the deep salts with no problem. It's great stuff. We know what to do with it, but we're not allowed really to do much with it because it's a political issue. It is not a scientific issue. And it's such a small amount of waste. Now, if you recycle the fuel, then the waste is even smaller. Okay, I get that. But it's already so small. Now, some of the new designs, like the molten salt designs, they actually have a smaller waste footprint because you can recycle them as you go. It's actually quite nice. You can use the molten salt to get the waste out and then just recycle plutonium and uranium back in. So there's a little bit of wiggle room there too. But essentially, the nuclear waste from any nuclear reactor is incredibly small, and we know what to do with it.
Yeah, the analogy, and Jim, I know you talked about on the whole world scale. The discussion we always use is with the waste from the United States that's been used since the beginning of commercial generation, so 50 years worth of supplying maybe 20% of the load. It all fits on a footprint the size of a football field, 20 feet high. Now think about that. All the nuclear waste in this country generating 20% of electricity for 50 years, football field 20 feet high. I always use the coal one like you, Jim. I grew up by a coal plant. There were acres and acres of sludge and coal. And I mean, it went on as far as the eye could see. So, yeah.
I've got one that I'd really like to personalize this because here in Seattle, we think we're really environmentally conscious. We recycle. We work really hard to reduce our garbage output. My garbage output, the average Seattleite garbage output every 11 days is 4 kilograms. And as you know, 4 kilograms would be 100 years of American energy demand, the average American's energy demand. So that's
Wow,
11
nice.
days for garbage or your entire life of nuclear fuel.
Yeah.
And we have some questions about NuScale. Several, one or more people asked a couple different questions about NuScale and if Energy Northwest is involved with them. Maybe you can talk about that.
Yeah, so we were, NuScale is UAMPS, Utah Association, and initially when they were going down that path, we were involved with them, but we had a memorandum of understanding, if you will, which is frankly gentleman's agreement that we'd be interested in potentially operating and maintaining that plant if it was built in the Idaho area or somewhere nearby. Since this opportunity came up for us, we have, if you will, amicably parted ways. They understand this needs to be our focus now. NuScale is still working with UAMPS right now down in the Idaho area, looking to potentially site a plant for them. I'll be honest, I think NuScale is talking to Grant County too, saying, hey, we're an option over here. We think the fact that the technology we're looking at, so UAMPS has the Department of Energy grants to build the first NuScale plant. The second one, if it gets built up here, doesn't have that Department of Energy money. So we believe the advanced reactors and that 50% matching from the Department of Energy just gives a financial bonus that makes it that makes more sense for us relative to savings for the customers on the other end. So it de-risked the project, if you will, quite a bit by having that 50% coverage, and will make the end product cheaper, we believe. So that's how we ended up there once we got these awards.
There's a couple of other key questions here. Michael asked, are you subsidized by BPA? No. Yeah, no, I mean, no, not at all. And also, how much do you need to add to the 4 cents a kilowatt hour to include waste disposal? Nothing. That's already in. See,
Right.
Nuclear is the only power source that actually pays in advance to dispose of the waste. And we have enough money in the Nuclear Waste Fund to dispose of it as long as we put it in the right place and we know what the right place is. So yeah, so that's not an issue. It won't increase the cost at all.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if coal had to take care of its waste, then yeah, it would be much more expensive. And even solar and wind with the heavy metals and things like that, they don't have to pay for that yet. We have to pay upfront for nuclear, and that's okay. That's great.
And by the way, solar and wind are still subsidized too, to your point, Jim. Not only do they not have to pay for that, but they're also subsidized. Yeah.
Someone brought up Vogtle and said, how do we know the construction of these SMRs will be not another summer Vogtle? So yeah.
The bottom line is this: is we think part of it is with the advanced reactors, the simplicity, the smaller footprint. We all believe that makes those much more predictable. In the end, it almost comes down as a civil engineering exercise, if you will. There's just less concrete, less steel, less moving parts, plain and simple.
Right.
That's why we have more comfort in the predictability. Jim, your thoughts?
Right, and also the SMRs can be factory manufactured and shipped, so
Yep.
You're not doing everything on site. But the real issue, and people don't really know how DOE works and how the industry works in general, it's the starting and stopping. When you it doesn't matter whether you're building the Golden Gate Bridge or whether you're building a nuclear power plant. If you start and stop and change contractors every 5 years and do all this nonsense and then start and stop, every time you're shut down, you lose $1 million a day. So you have to start and finish. Now, many projects start and finish, and that's great. But nuclear is one of those that just gets stopped by protests, by legislature, by a whole bunch of things, changing contractors, and that's what happened with Vogtle and with almost all large nuclear facilities like that. Once you start and stop and change contractors in the middle of it, you simply keep adding billions to it. So that's the nice thing about the SMRs, is you won't be doing that. You won't have to change contractors midway through. You won't have to stop and start on site, because most of it's going to be manufactured in a factory and shipped to the site.
And I've got a little bit of family history in this, as my dad was working for Energy Northwest, then WPPSS, at the Satsuma plant. And of course, that's when we saw a massive upheaval in regulation. And those those questions, the questions about how to manage projects of this scale, simply are solved this decade. Like, my dad was literally using a Compaq 8088 to write software to manage the SATSIP project. And now we have billions of dollars invested in all of these engineering project management solutions, as well as things like how to finance. We saw with the new scale where all of the municipalities involved in the UAMPS project had specific dates that they had to commit to stick with or get out. And that was the off-ramp dates. And I expect that we'll hopefully see something very similar where everyone will tender their offers into the system, and then they will have a certain date that they have to decide once and for all. You're either in or you're out, and none of the 11th hour pullout that we saw in the 80s.
And there's an interesting question from Kit. Are there any SMRs working in place now, and where and how many?
Yes, there are. It's called the nuclear navy.
Yeah.
We have hundreds. Yeah.
Yeah, they are. And I think China might have a model just close to coming online with one of the smaller ones. But yeah, that's it. As Jim noted, the Navy submarines. Yep.
Yep. They're small modular. They're great. Never had a problem with them. And it took us a while to figure out that small is good. And okay, so now we have. And as long as you can modularize them, add them together to make a big one, perfect.
Great. If anyone else has any questions, we're ready and waiting, even online. And let's give everyone a quick shout out to where we're broadcasting. While these questions roll in, you can find a recording of this broadcast at yestv.org. That's my YouTube channel, yestv.org. But please check out the Seattle Friends of Fission on Facebook. That's this logo you see right next to my face is the Seattle Friends of Fission. We've got a Facebook page, we've got a meetup, and we would be extremely happy to see many of you. We'll probably transition back to a once a month meeting because I'm vaccinated. I'm happy and ready to get out back to Ada's books. That's one of our old meeting places. So I'm really excited, but I am also a media expert. So I am really excited to try to at least bring you a live stream of our content. And we have wonderful presenters like Jim, like Dr. Nick Turan, whatisnuclear.com, all sorts of people that will be able to bring more information about this to you in the future. So there's a little discussion over the bond increase from SATSIP, but I think I covered that pretty well. This was a combination of no structured off-ramp, not really having the technical capabilities in the 80s to pull off a construction job like we have. Certainly, we have seen enormous builds. We've seen like the giant towers go up everywhere across the country that simply were not built at the same rate that they are today.
Someone asked a little while ago, what can people do to support this new nuclear, and hopefully saving our existing nuclear? What can people do?
Well, I think it's what I'll tell you is it's helping educate friends and neighbors, if you will, relative to the need and the role that we could play. That's part of the reason I do things like this, and people like Jim are out there, is to try to provide people with information that they can then use to go talk to their neighbors, family members, and let them know how we're part of the solution. Because once again, that it's hard to find people that actually say they're in favor of wrecking the environment. Okay, so the real key is to help them understand then what can we realistically do to save the environment, and being armed with that knowledge and being willing to spread that knowledge is the biggest piece of that. That would be fantastic. The more we can build momentum, if you will, from those of us who understand the importance of nuclear to addressing the future, it's going to help this go a lot smoother.
I have a lot to say about this. I have made the last 5 years of my life, one of my biggest hobbies is organizing, being a political activist, helping out Seattle Friends of Fission. And I have also found other local environmental groups to get involved with. And I this is my personal recommendation. I think Citizens Climate Lobby is great. They have a nuclear committee. You can join that. If you're a Democrat, you can join Washington State Mountain and Environment Caucus. If you are a socialist, you can join DSA Eco-Socialist, either the national or the Seattle chapter. Great people there. If you're a Republican, well, you probably know a lot of people who support nuclear energy. It is here for our energy independence, and energy independence is a very good conservative value. So just tell your friends, hey, it is not a disaster. It is not, an accident waiting to happen. We understand how to do this, and we have the American know-how and the American ability to make new things, better things in the modern era. And great call out from Jason. Nuclear Matters, a great organization. And so let me shout out a few more. There's Generation Atomic. We've got a really great relationship with Generation Atomic. I think they're a fantastic organization. They are gearing up to defend Byron and Dresden plant from closure. Those are the next two plants on the anti-nuclear hit list. They're vulnerable to extremely cheap natural gas prices and having no protections like we have here in Washington. That clean energy guarantee bill, which was really the savior, going to be the savior of the climate movement, I think.
Excellent.
I saw.
All right.
Oh,
Any more questions, Carl? Or
Dan Blanky makes a great comment about our interest in the Saving the Salmon movement, and I know that Jim gave us a presentation, showed us it's a very complex, complex problem. Brad, do you have any comments on how you're integrated with this this idea of using nuclear energy to replace some of those Snake River dams?
This is not an area of expertise for me, the salmon piece. So, but I will tell you this, just a couple thoughts on it. And anytime you look at removing, and I think you're looking at 4,000 megawatts plus of carbon free, given the new legislation, given the challenges we're having with the environment and the climate, I think we want to think long and hard about that before we go rip out. I would say that's similar to what's going on in Illinois when you're going to shut down these nuclear plants, as we just mentioned. And in 2 years from now, you're going to be trying to figure out how to replace them with carbon free. So not an expert on salmon. And I'm, as I said, I'm a big proponent for anything environment and climate, but saving the salmon is important. But tearing out 4,000 megawatts carbon free right now, looking at this legislation, I think we need to think long and hard and understand if there's other options available. Not to mention, we looked at helping one of our members with a small dam they asked us about up in the northern part of the state. I mean, a very small one. It's going to be billions and billions of dollars to remove those and restore. And you got to ask yourself, where's that money going to come from? And then when you're done, you got to find 4,000 more megawatts carbon free. So
great.
Yeah, it's a very complicated subject, and we've never done anything like that. We have never decommissioned a large dam like those, ever. And the small ones we've done have been lengthy and expensive and difficult.
yes.
So just saying we've done one before is not true. We have never done anything like this. So, and it'll take about 25 years to do it. So you have to say, okay, 25 years, then you start helping the salmon. We need it a lot faster than that. So there are things you can do without tearing out dams that we need to do that we're not doing.
Right.
Great. Well, I want to thank you, Brad. You've been extremely generous with your time. Thank you so much for coming and speaking with us. Thank you, Jim Conca, for being a great interviewer and letting me focus on the production. I hope the recording looks great. I think I might have dropped audio once, but the vast majority of our content should be up. I'm going to say thanks and goodbye to the stream. And after this, we'll let anyone who's involved say goodbye, and then we will open up for everyone to participate. Turn on your camera, turn on your microphone, and maybe get some other questions out. So thank you everyone online, and I'm going to stop stream.